würden gerne diskutieren, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, über Opportunities and Challenges facing Israel's international area. Und deswegen würde ich gerne hier auf der Bühne jetzt begrüßen, meine Damen und Herren. Ich zähle Sie jetzt alle auf und ich würde Sie bitten, Sie zu begrüßen, weil wir wollen über die Politik diskutieren. Und zwar, wir beginnen mit Noam Katz, den Senior Deputy Director, General Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Katz, please come on stage. Vorsicht, please have a seat. I would like to meet Chloé Valdary, American writer and political activist. Chloé, where are you? Dr. Felix Klein, er ist Beauftragter der Bundesregierung für jüdisches Leben in Deutschland und Kampf gegen Antisemitismus. Hier ist Dr. Klein. Ich grüße Sie, hallo, guten Tag, bitte nehmen Sie Platz. Tzahi Gavrieli, der Director National Task Force for Countering Delegitimization vom Minister of Strategic Affairs. Hi, how are you doing? Und moderieren wird das Ganze die unwahrscheinlich geniale, gigantische, besondere, wir alle lieben sie, Melody. Come on, get on stage. Sucharewicz.
So, can we summarize Israel's history since its establishment in a simple mathematical formula? Let's give it a try. 0 natural resources plus lots of enemies plus lots of desert, plus Zionist values and virtues, means brave fighters, a strong democratic fundament, hard physical work, a multicultural DNA, and I'm missing something, yes, multiply this by an immense creative drive. I think this is a good or precise formula summing up Israel's history. Right now, we're going to be dealing with the current version of this formula, with the challenges and the opportunities Israel is facing in the international arena. And we're going to talk about this with quite a unique group of experts that I'm happy to introduce right now. Hello, Chloé.
Hi.
So let me start with a very brief introduction of Dr. Felix Klein. The media right now are full of speculations about the next chairmanship of the CDU. In fact, the most important person for the democracy in Germany is sitting right now next to us. This is the special commissioner by the government for anti-Semitism, Felix Klein. And he started actually a career in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and now was appointed to this very special and very important position in Germany quite recently, and congratulations for this tough job that you have. Chloé is an American writer and political activist, which is a terrible understatement in her case. She's also a brand ambassador and a thought leader at Jerusalem U, a film production that is based in Israel. But there's a lot to say about Chloé, about the things she does and publishes, but if you want the actual informal intro about her, she's a rock star. She's a rock star for Israel, and not because she stands with Israel, but because how she does it. She invented her own unique style, and you will watch her videos online and will understand what I mean, has a very, very deep understanding of Jewish philosophy, of Israel, of its people, its treasures, and she manages to bring across her views and her emotions about Israel in the most effective and powerful and authentic way that I have actually ever seen. So this is Chloé, an applause that is for you. Ambassador Noam Katz is the Deputy Director of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he's also the head of public diplomacy, and could in fact be really seen as a guru of public diplomacy in the ministry and beyond, as he oversees all of the ministry's activities around the globe, including the formulation and the implementation of Israel's traditional and the digital communication strategies. He has in fact been shaping the professionalization of public diplomacy in Israel for over 2 decades. A warm applause, Ambassador Noam Katz. Last but not least, to my right is Tzahi Gavrieli, who is the director of the National Task Force for Countering Delegitimization, the word that is so difficult to say that you should actually earn an award for saying it correctly. And he's also the Deputy Director General at Israel's Ministry for Strategic Affairs and Public Diplomacy. Before this, he served as an advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I believe before that also to Ehud Olmert and to Ariel Sharon. A warm welcome to you, Tzahi Gavrieli. I would like to start with you, Chloé, on the other end of the table.
Yes.
Israel's perception in most countries abroad today is a challenge pretty much like the desert used to be a challenge for Israel when it was established. You act as a role model in that sense and have an immense success in reaching out to masses of people. How do you do it, and what do you tell young generations? Who want to inspire and want to do your kind of work? How to do it?
It's a great question. So, hi everyone, my name is Chloé. As was stated in the introduction, I work for an educational organization called Jerusalem U. We do Israel education through film, particularly through documentaries and through the digital space with a focus on YouTube. Part of my job entails speaking not only on college campuses, but also at many high schools, Jewish high schools across America. And so I interface a lot with young Jews who are, in high school and really thinking about how to get involved in the Israel space, both currently and once they get to college. And the way I inspire them is really multifactorial. I try to ignite within them a sense of love for their heritage, a sense of the historical, I would say, majesty of their heritage, which can be a difficult thing because there's a lot of apathy often in the Jewish community in America. And I do that by a lot of the things that we're producing at Jerusalem U. So, for example, we just finished producing a YouTube series about identity within Israeli society and how it's fascinating and different and complex and how we can learn different things and take different things from the way Israelis navigate identity within their country and apply it to how we do it in America. So that's one of the ways in which I try to inspire them. And another way I inspire them is by trying to give them tools and resources to deal with the somewhat hostile situations they may face in college, and once they get to college, once they're on the college campus. And I try to give them tools that will help them, participate in transformative conversations about Israel, so they'll be ready once they get to college.
I didn't understand your last sentence, Chloé, I'm sorry.
Which part? About the college?
The last sentence, if you repeat that again.
Yes, so in addition to the digital work that I do, I also try to give them tools for once they get to college, because these guys are in high school, to prepare them for the somewhat hostile territory they might encounter.
Okay, and we will come back to that really fascinating field of your work in a little bit. I would like, speaking of this kind of branding already, ask you, Dr. Klein, and I switched to German just because it feels more natural to speak in German to you. Welche Rolle spielt Israel? Die Vorurteile einerseits, die wir allzu gut kennen, und auch darauf kommen wir ein bisschen später nochmal konkreter zu sprechen, und andererseits die immense Leistungskraft, das, was Israel zu bieten hat. Welche Rolle spielt das in Ihrer Arbeit gegen Antisemitismus?
Kann ich Deutsch sprechen oder Englisch? Oder?
Sie sprechen die Sprache, die Sie sprechen möchten, denn im Moment gibt es Simultanübersetzung. Ich habe verstanden, es gibt Simultanübersetzung.
Also,
ja.
Hat zwar Englisch, aber Deutsch spreche ich natürlich lieber. Ja, der israelbezogene Antisemitismus ist die größte Herausforderung, die ich in meiner Arbeit zu bewältigen habe, denn er speist alle Formen des traditionellen Antisemitismus, ob er nun von rechts kommt, von Muslimen oder auch von ganz links, Stichwort Antisemitismus in der DDR, der auch immer noch nachgewirkt hat. Alle diese Formen haben heutzutage sehr stark mit Israel zu tun und auch der sogenannte sekundäre Antisemitismus ist in Bezug auf Israel der höchste in Deutschland. Sätze wie: Die Juden brauchen sich nicht zu wundern, dass sie unbeliebt sind, wenn man sieht, was Israel mit den Palästinensern anstellt. Das sind Sätze, die finden etwa 40% Zustimmung in der deutschen Bevölkerung. Das ist alarmierend und hier sehe ich mich natürlich auch ganz besonders gefordert. Das heißt, wenn wir über Israel aufklären, die Leistungen Israels darstellen, auch das moderne Israel präsentieren in Deutschland, dann hat das unmittelbare positive Auswirkungen auf den Kampf gegen Antisemitismus heutzutage. Also das würde ich wirklich als mit die größte Herausforderung ansehen. Premierminister Netanyahu hat Anfang Oktober, als die deutsch-israelischen Regierungskonsultationen in Jerusalem stattfanden, auch darauf hingewiesen, dass der israelbezogene Antisemitismus wahrscheinlich die größte Herausforderung ist und dem kann man nur zustimmen.
Um gleich dabei anzuknüpfen, zurück zur Leistungskraft Israels als Tool bei dieser Aufklärung. Ambassador Katz, Israel is an innovation powerhouse with immense contributions, we all know it, to the global challenges in the field of cancer research, water, food technology, cybersecurity, just to name a few. Can you share some practical insights on how this innovation power shapes Israel's foreign relations?
Thank you, Melody. I would say that probably if I would ask the people here around and also my colleagues around the table about the challenges, people will know how to focus very quickly on certain challenges that are related to anti-Semitism, to the influence of the BDS movement, maybe to the disorientation and disconnect of Jewish communities. I would like to speak a little bit about some of the opportunities as we see it from a level of a state. 10 years ago, if you would check what would be the image of Israel, the image of Israel was clearly associated with two things. One was conflict in the Middle East, and the other element was religious element, and usually I must say not the positive side of religion. Israel was seen as more connected to the sides of religions that are extremist and radical. Part of the reason that this was the major image of the State of Israel was the fact that Israel is the second largest station in the world for foreign journalists. And the story that they were telling the people was a story about conflict. That was the main focus. We have decided about 12 years ago to change course and to highlight some other aspects of the life of Israel. And today, I can happily say that there was a big success, and today Israel is also identified with entrepreneurship, with innovation, and with creative spirit. How did it happen, and what are the tools that help to create that change? First, I would tell you something. Just last week, we concluded a world international poll in more than 60 countries, including countries in the Arab world, including Iran. When it comes to the conflict, the Israeli-Arab conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, about something between 30 to 40% of the people has some kind of opinion, whether it's positive or negative. About 60 to 70% around the world has no opinion at all. But when they were asked a simple question about Israel, do you know some of the fields that Israel excels And do you think that this is relevant and you would like your country to have relations with Israel based on this field? 70% worldwide said yes, of course. More than 50% in the Arab world. In the Arab world, between 30% to 50% say that they are willing to some kind of relations with Israel, whether they are open or whether they are secret, but relations with Israel in order to have some kind to have the ability to earn from that kind of relations with the state of Israel. It means that they can be very negative about Israel on the political aspect, even ideological, but they still seek contacts and relations with the state of Israel. Part of the things that help us to create that is, of course, the change in the Israeli economy and lifeline. But the other part of it is that the world of communication changed dramatically. I said that Israel is the second largest station of journalists around the world, but the real tool today to communicate and to engage with other people became the digital environment. We can mediate ourselves better through the digital environment than we do it through the press. The press is a kind of mediator that we have to convince, and now we can talk in our own voice and speak really with people bypassing all kinds of obstacles. For example, Israel has no relations with the Arab world. Only with two states we have peace agreements, with Jordan and with Egypt. It's very difficult, even in those countries, to create relations between Israelis and to bring to life the reality in Israel to people and develop a meaningful conversation. We can do it only through social media today. And it's growing very fast. Today we have a conversation every month with more than 100 million people in that segment, in the Arab world, and Arab world and Muslim world, including Iran. So it allows us to communicate directly, to develop conversations. Some of these conversations are not nice conversations, but they are still conversations. And some of these conversations allow us to develop some kind of relations that are not only conversation. When you tell people about medicine, when you tell people about water technologies, when you tell people about all kinds of developments, they would like to purchase, they would like to build relations. And many contacts are being done with the business world. When it comes to public diplomacy, relations between states are not made by governments alone. Government to government was true to the 19th century, maybe to the beginning of the 19th century. But relations between states depend on the strength of relations between civil societies and between business communities. It's civil society with civil society. It's civil society with business community. It's business community with government. All the possible crossings create strong relations between states. If it depends only on government, it can change like that. And today, the tools of public diplomacy allow us to create that direct contact. And that's not only true to the Arab world, it's true to everywhere around the world. And the last thing about public diplomacy is to promote the interest of your country in another country. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not that I win something, the other lose. It's a win-win situation. It's a kind of competition, and there is competition between states on everything, on attention, on investment, on tourism, on anything. But it stimulates the relation, and it stimulates the economy and all other aspects. The last aspect of public diplomacy is the future. Public diplomacy of a state is the only segment in a state that is dealing with the future. Diplomats and governments are working on the relations now. We ask ourselves what kind of relations we will have in the future, how we make relations in the future better than they are today, in 10 years from now. Who will be the leadership, economic leadership, social leadership, cultural leadership, academic leadership, political leadership in a different society, and how we do things today in order to communicate and to build relations with them today that will yield in the future. And that can be done on the basis of relevancy. Relevancy on all the other fields that are important to the 70% living in those societies.
Where you face, of course, in these, an arena where you face, of course, an additional challenge of competition by information that is trying to discredit the information communicated by Israel, which brings us to you, Tzahi, Gavrieli. Tell us, since the Vietnam War, the world understood that information is a fourth weapon kind after the army, the navy, the air force. Israel has undoubtedly always had an incredibly strong army, an incredibly strong military strength. Jews in the diaspora sometimes feel that Israel's been less strong in performing in this information war that Israel has been suffering from for the past decade, if not decades. Your ministry is kind of the Ministry of Strategic Affairs, and we heard your minister speak earlier. It's really a ray of hope in that sense, as kind of a new weapon in this information war. Can you tell us about the performance?
Thank you, Melody. Noam spoke about the opportunities of the State of Israel in terms of its image, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is doing some great job in the last decade. I'll speak about challenges. I have to bring the bad, the negative side of it. But image this: when there's a state trying to plant a forest, either of you, trying to build a forest, and you have someone who is trying constantly to poison the roots. This is the only state that I know, a democratic state, that faces a very designated campaign to delegitimize. Just a quick story, you know, the first time when I got home, my first day at job, so my wife in Baal asked me, how was it? I said, well, it was tough. Why tough? I mean, you wanted it. I said, well, you tried to say delegitimization 6 times a day. Well, going back to this image of poisoning the roots, this is not only about Melody, it's not only about the war of information or the cognitive battlefield. When you look at the greater scope of delegitimization, what would you need, the ingredients, in order to delegitimize a state? Let's take any democratic state. Let's detach ourselves a bit from Israel. Well, Noam spoke about Israel, that it's the second I would say, station for a journalist worldwide. You would need an extensive and enormous coverage of a tiny state that each and every day would be covering the Israeli government resolutions, decisions, laws, and you would preferably need some bias, preferably in English, in the UK, in the US. Then it's not enough, because then you would need some kind of a civil society front or a grassroots engine. A BDS is not just kind of well, it's a part of a whole umbrella of delegitimizing the State of Israel. This goes in conjunction with another aspect. So we have media, we have civil society engine, which is grassroots. If you add it, as we heard before, social media, that's great, because grassroots and social media goes wonderful together. You can do whatever you want in social media. You can lie, and you can get credited for it with likes and shares and engagement. The third thing that you would need in order to delegitimize a democratic state would be working at state level. Try lobbying in states, parliaments, local governments, municipalities, whatever suits you, wherever you can do it. And the fourth, I would say, dimension is working in international arena, international organization and tribunals. If you have the fourth of them, so you start a good, decent campaign in order to delegitimize a state. Oh, you know what? I forgot something. Money. You would need a lot of money. Well, $100 million in the last 3 years were invested from 2014 to 2017 in delegitimizing directly the state of Israel. Some of it, the minister said, Minister Erdan, my minister, our minister, coming from the EU, coming from European governments, coming from a very friendly states. That's worrying. That's illegitimate. That's immoral to support boycott of Jewish state, to support boycott of Jews. And it's, again, we could see only the war of information, and we are acting in this I would say, capacity. But let us not forget, this is a whole fourth arms campaign, designated campaign against the state of Israel. And you've asked in terms of the answers. 3 years ago, the Security Cabinet has decided, Prime Minister Netanyahu, led by Prime Minister Netanyahu, following the leadership of Gilad Erdan, the minister, to erect a special task force in the Ministry of Strategic Affairs. This is a small ministry under the auspices of the Prime Minister's office, with one aim: counter the delegitimization campaign and focus on the BDS aspects. Since then, there's 30 people in this ministry, very talented people, coming from diplomacy, media, strategy, economy, law, and working kind of just like a governmental startup, some of them doing nothing, just getting paid to think brightly and out of the box. And this specific team for the last 2 years is doing 3 basic things, and some of them the minister has spoken. You have seen this maybe outspoken in the media. The first thing is to research, to understand more about who are the perpetrators behind delegitimizing the state of Israel. There are connections to terror. And you have spoken about this, the secondary anti-Semitism. What are the nature in terms of anti-Semitic remarks, events, being affiliated with different groups? So the first one is to understand, to research. The second thing that we do in the task force is to operate with government ministries. We have very direct and friendship collaboration. Me and Noam speaking each and every evening. So my wife always asks, who do you speak with? I say, with Noam. Operating with government ministries and organizations worldwide. We, in fact, networking with more than 130 organizations from South Africa to Sweden to the US, here in Germany. And we're proud to do so because you said it before, Noam. This is civil society towards civil society, and states towards state, and other entities towards the same parallel entities. And the third thing that we do in this national task force is this cognitive warfare, and I'm coming back with a very long kind of introductory to this war of information. There's an ongoing cognitive battlefield to delegitimize the state of Israel, using BDS organizations, using very powerful media hubs, printed and online, using some very powerful images, symbols, people that you know. Some of them you have on your playlist, in your iPods. And this 360 campaign in terms of media, in terms of cognitive battlefield, is present. So we have erected a few networks, 100 bloggers from around the world working together in different languages from different states. We have erected 4il.org.il, which is a hub for, if you will enter 4il.org.il, you will see what's going on in these specific weeks worldwide in terms of delegitimization. Which demonstration, which campaign, where do these organizations are pointing at? I think that in terms of the war of information, the cognitive battlefield, we have to strategize better, and that's what we're trying to do with colleagues, friends, organizations, collaborations around the globe. It's not only English. We always think about English in the US. No, it's not about US. It's first of all about Europe. It's about you guys. It's about us. Thank you.
So if you have the privilege of addressing really the crème de la crème of the supporters for Israel in Germany right now in front of you, what is it that you tell them? How can they support concretely, individually, Israel in this information war?
Oh, you ask me?
Yeah. It's a follow-up question.
Take a part. Don't stand aside. When you see aspects of lies, double standard, take a side and do it in German. You're in Germany. There's wonderful outlets of information coming from, and I saw it yesterday. We had a roundtable with dozens of organizations here with information. If you seek for information, you can address us, you can address the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, of course.
Is there any kind of plan to pool the databases and make it easier for Israel supporters, especially abroad, to find information and to know who their mom and dad is when it comes to supporting Israel's, call it political PR?
So in terms of German language, you will always have scarcity. You do not have enough. We're going to publish in a few weeks a very detailed report about the connections between the BDS movement and the PFLP and the Hamas. We will, of course, put it also in German, French, Spanish, and English, naturally. The fact is that you have a lot of great materials, a lot of amazing materials in English. Well, it doesn't help you much.
What?
So the first step is create a lot of content, relevant content, culture-oriented to the German public, and just don't stand aside. I mean, there are outlets that can provide you materials. We are doing our best in order to have these materials also in German.
Okay. And Dr. Klein, you touched it before, the anti-Semitism/anti-Zionism question, and really risking that Günter Grass, and I switch back to German, mit dem Risiko, dass Günter Grass sich im Grab umdrehen würde. Antisemitismus und Anti-Israelismus sind heute wie siamesische Zwillinge, kaum mehr voneinander zu trennen. Gibt es eine Strategie? Hatten Sie bereits Gelegenheit, eine Strategie zu entwickeln? Wie gehen Sie damit um und mit der immensen Menge an Hassinformationen, die zu diesen siamesischen Zwillingen im Internet herumspazieren?
Ja, also ich bin gerade dabei, mit meinem Team, das jetzt aufgebaut wird, kohärente Strategien zu entwickeln. Aber natürlich, man muss nur kurz ins Internet schauen, um zu sehen, welcher Hass, welche unakzeptablen Wörter, und nicht nur Wörter, also Paradigmen und Narrative gegenüber Israel da existieren. Das ist erschreckend. Wir haben immerhin in Deutschland ja ein Instrument, das Netzwerke-Durchsetzungsgesetz, das die Internetfirmen bekanntlich haftbar macht, wenn sie innerhalb einer gewissen Frist nicht diese Inhalte sofort wegnehmen.
24 Stunden?
Aber leider, ja, also 24 Stunden bzw. 72 Stunden. Aber ich stelle fest, dass das Gesetz viel zu wenig mit Leben erfüllt wird, dass es viel zu wenig Fälle gibt, die dann tatsächlich erfolgreich dazu führen, dass diese Hasspostings oder eben diese Hassinhalte weggenommen werden. Und also das ist auch eines meiner nächsten Schritte. Ich werde wieder das Gespräch mit der Bundesjustizministerin suchen, um Strategien zu entwickeln. Wie können wir die Instrumente, die wir haben, besser nutzen? Also das ist ein ganz wichtiger Punkt. Aber weil hier schon auch so von BDS die Rede war, das ist auch eine große Sorge, die ich habe in Deutschland. Kommen viele BDS-Vertreter so vermeintlich freundlich herüber, weil sie sich für die Rechte der Schwachen einsetzen, vermeintlich eben ohne Gewalt, so sagen sie ja, sich für die Rechte der Palästinenser einsetzen. Und hier müssen wir ganz klare Kante zeigen, dass BDS hochaggressiv ist, wenn man eben die Ziele tatsächlich mal zu Ende denkt, was BDS fordert, würde das auf das Ende des Staates Israel herauslaufen. Und hier sehe ich mich also absolut auch in der Pflicht, die deutsche Öffentlichkeit und auch, ehrlich gesagt, einige Ministerien noch stärker darauf aufmerksam zu machen, wie gefährlich BDS ist. Und als letztes, ja, also Sie haben es ja schon gesagt, Anti-Israelismus und Antizionismus sind zwei Seiten und Antisemitismus, zwei oder drei Seiten desselben Körpers. Oftmals kommt natürlich ganz handfester Antisemitismus in Form von Kritik an Israel erst einmal daher und dann relativ schnell merkt man, es ist auch mit anderen Dingen verbunden und ganz klarer Israel-Hass. Was ich so Besonderes auch bemerke am Antisemitismus, er ist immer auch verbunden mit einer antimodernen anderen Ideologie. Also entweder Ablehnung von demokratischen Werten, Ablehnung des Westens an sich, Ablehnung auch von Globalisierung und deren Effekten. Und da müssen wir auch sehr stark aufpassen, dass wir das trennen. Und hier sehe ich auch wieder Aktivität für mich, dass wir auch aufklären über die Grenzen. Bis wohin ist es absolut in Ordnung, auch in einem freien Land Akte einer anderen Regierung zu kritisieren und ab wann wird es eben absolut inakzeptabel und wird eine rote Linie überschritten. Vielleicht noch ein letztes. Sie haben es ja gesagt, es ist schon erstaunlich, die öffentliche Aufmerksamkeit in der Weltpresse, was in Israel passiert. Also so viele Korrespondenten, ausländische Presse, auch Internetaufmerksamkeit, das ist schon erstaunlich. Und auch selbst die deutschen öffentlich-rechtlichen Sender, die ja vermeintlich sagen, neutral berichten, tappen also immer wieder in die Falle. Wenn Sie zum Beispiel sagen, also das Wort jüdische Siedlungen alleine zu benutzen, führt doch direkt dazu, dass deutsche Juden verantwortlich gemacht werden für ein Phänomen, worauf sie gar keinen Einfluss haben als deutsche Staatsbürger. Und das werde ich nochmal öffentlich anprangern und sagen, das geht so nicht. Hier müssen wir das Gespräch suchen mit den Intendanten von den Fernsehstationen oder auch andere Sachen. Wenn ich höre, israelische Soldaten hätten so und so viele Palästinenser an der Grenze zum Gazastreifen umgebracht, das ist also ein völlig inakzeptables Wort in dem Zusammenhang, müssen wir dagegen vorgehen. Und ja, hier suche ich natürlich Sie auch als Verbündete, das müssen wir gemeinsam tun, denn es ist eine gute Sache. Dankeschön.
Ja, es wäre in der Tat nicht komplett die Diskussion über Antisemitismus in Deutschland zu führen und auch über Anti-Israelismus, ohne dabei auch die Komponente oder die Manipulation der Medien, bewusst oder unbewusst, intentioniert oder unintentioniert, auch zu besprechen. Denn die Berichterstattung über Israel über die Jahre hinweg hat einen ganz relevanten Beitrag zu einem total verzerrten Bild geführt. Interestingly enough, among the actors fighting against these phenomena right now, very strongly so in Germany, in Europe in general, Austria, we heard it a lot last week, are the right extremists or populist party, however you want to define them. Ambassador Katz, can you tell us a little bit about current trends, opportunities and challenges facing Israel's strategic alliances, maybe to touch on how Israel handles this issue of the right populist, but also beyond, of course, the world is big and there are strategic alliances like Cyprus and Greece that are currently cooking that are highly interesting.
Well, I would like to raise 2 points that we should pay attention to. First, radicalization online. It's something that has to be tackled. There are various ways to do so, but we need to understand for a second the mechanism. The mechanism of radicalization is the echo chambers and bubbles that exist in new media. The new media world is built of communities, communities where you feel comfortable. And in that communities, you have communities that are very radical. And people either are joining or are living there, are influenced by what is happening in those echo chambers. The echo chambers is something that is created first by the tendency of people, but secondly by the algorithm that create the social media. The algorithm, with no intention, has only one intention, to keep you on the platform in activity that you enjoy. And therefore, if you have cats, you'll get a lot of information about cats. And if you like sport or food, you'll get a lot of information about sport or food. And if you are full of hate, you'll get a lot of information about hate. People also that are living in those communities will not complain because they get what they want. If the companies are saying we have community guidelines, if something bad is happening, I'm not aware that somebody would like to kill me because I'm not living in that echo chamber. I can't complain. And therefore, we have to build a new system because we are living in a new life environment that was created out of nothing. It's ex juris, it's outside of the law. And we have to adapt and bring the different responsibilities. So one responsibility is, of course, of the state. The state has responsibility for the safety and well-being of its citizens, and therefore it has to monitor, to look, and to take care of the problems that it identifies. Secondly, it's an issue for the companies. They create the guidelines. They listen and they can monitor better than any government. And thirdly, it's the responsibility of each one of you. You are all members of your own communities that support Israel. But you have to build relations with other communities. You have to listen to the conversation. You have to create communities that will monitor themselves in order to get the attention to the right other stakeholders, to the companies to complain or to the government. So that's one part of radicalization and how each one of you can be active, building communities and dealing with them. Secondly, I would like to say something about political environment, whether it's in Israel or in Europe or in the United States. Polarization is very high today. The value of facts and news and truth is eroded. And therefore, your opinion is equal to mine. Your fact, alternative fact, somebody say, is a fact to many others. So the situation is very problematic. I think that we have to build coalitions of people that are committed to facts, coalitions of people that are committed to truth, and work together. If we want to work against hate, it's not only the hate against Israel, it's not only the anti-Semitism, the hate against Jews, it's the hate against LGBT, against white people or black people. It's about hate. That's what we need to form the kind of coalitions. And it can be done because the kind of hate is stimulating in the same way in various places. It can be identified and then it can be checked. And I won't say that we can eliminate it, but we can reduce it. Today, anti-Semitism, I don't have to work hard. I don't need any system of monitoring. It's out there. I go into Arabic networks and I read it out there. I go to English. I search in Google and I find it. I'm not speaking about the dark web. 3% of the web is the web that you know, and 97% is the dark web. But what influences us, ordinary people, is the 3%. Yes. And even there, it's very easy to find a lot of bad information. Be part of the fight against it. Mark it. Yes.
And for a future discussion, we probably should add the issue of freedom of speech in the internet era, and to what extent certain laws may have to be mended in order to suit this new hate-driven reality that we experience online. Chloé, you and your work, how do you deal with the masses of negative information and hatred inspiring information? For example, when you do your clips, do you integrate that at all? Is this something that guides your conceptual process, or you just blank it out and say, I want to reach those that are still open to hear what Israel is really about?
That's a great question. I have a lot to say about this.
Good, I'm happy. Say a lot, but say it fast because we are running out of time.
Okay, so just some quick history. In 2015, I was at the Wall Street Journal for a year. And while at the Wall Street Journal, I did a 82-page thesis paper on the topic of Israel and millennial engagement. What works, what doesn't, and how to make it better. And like the Ministry of Strategic Affairs, I had to collect a lot of data about pro-Israel affinity in America, about millennial levels of love or lack thereof for Israel. And I found something striking. I found that we in America have been conflating two very important questions. The first question we were asking ourselves were, how do we stop anti-Semitism, right? Which seems to be a theme that we're discussing today, right? Which is it's a noble question, but we were confusing that question with how do we get people to fall in love with Israelis? We were taking the question of how do we get people to stop hating, right? Which is what we've been discussing, but we weren't really addressing, okay, so how do we get people to start loving? And it was that latter question that I became obsessed with, essentially. And in order to address that question, I began to ask myself, okay, if I know what young people are already in love with, if I can track those trends, then how can I use that? How can I use that to get them to fall in love with Israeli society, right? So it's a sort of different paradigm with which to approach this challenge of anti-Semitism.
So what did you find?
Okay.
Nike, for example.
Right. So the greatest source that shows you what young people love and what people in general love is pop culture. Right? Pop culture is what we gravitate toward as human beings, right? Whether that's Nike as a company, whether that's singer-songwriters like Beyonce. So I collected all this data on pop culture, and then I started to probe, okay, well, what is it about this content that causes human connection, right? What is it about Beyonce's music that causes people to go crazy? Why is it that Nike's advertising is so compelling that people fall in love and mass buy its product? And how can I use that to create content that will get people to fall in love with Israelis? And I think that that's the central question that has animated whether it's the articles that I write, the digital content that I produce. So that's one level. But then I took it to another level with regard to addressing the question of how we discuss the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on campus and in other hostile or potentially hostile areas, right? The negative Israel conversation on campus, at least in America, is a product of the framework in which that conversation is had. Broadly speaking, some people refer to it as intersectionality, right? And I'm not going to go into the political analysis of intersectionality, but I will go into the existential analysis of intersectionality.
Give just one sentence what you mean when you refer to intersectionality.
So intersectionality is a political theory that was invented in the 70s that essentially says that people experience intersecting forms of oppression, right? Which that one statement is factual, but there are other elements of intersectionality that are problematic. And what intersectionality does on campus, it creates an atmosphere in which people are encouraged essentially to prejudge each other, to assume things about one another, whether it's based on skin color, whether it's based on a level of financial stability or lack thereof, etc. It leads to racial essentialism. So this is the framework in which the Israel conversation is being had. So in order to make the Israel conversation positive, you have to change that framework, right? You have to challenge that framework. So throughout the process of writing this thesis, I developed a framework to challenge that. And the framework is called the theory of enchantment. And the theory of enchantment has 3 principles. And it says, if we're going to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, we will use these 3 principles to shape how this conversation goes forward. This is really about first principles. Can we agree on first principles? The first principle in the 3 principles is, number 1, Israelis and Palestinians are human beings, not political abstractions. Because the first thing that happens on college campuses is we abstract about Israelis, right? Anti-Israel people like to abstract. They like to turn them into things, into objects, into things that you can dehumanize. So the first thing we must agree on if we enter this conversation is that Israelis and Palestinians are human beings, not political abstractions, which means we will devote ourselves to not dehumanizing, not stereotyping, not objectifying, right? That's number 1, and then I will use pop culture to supplement that principle. The second principle is, if you want to criticize in order to uplift and empower, never to tear down, never to destroy, right? So if you want to criticize something happening in the Israeli government that you don't like, you have to do so from a place of wanting to see Israelis flourish. Same thing goes for if you want to criticize Palestinian society. And the third principle, which is the hardest principle to enact, is everything we do, we try to root in love and compassion. Now, what does that mean on a practical level? It means that if you're a Zionist on campus and you're being approached by a great deal of hostility because someone doesn't like you and is making assumptions about you, etc., you do two things. Let's say someone comes up to me and because I'm a Zionist, they say, I don't know, you're a baby killer or something crazy like that. I respond to them by saying two things. I say, first of all, I don't know you from Adam, right? You're making assumptions about me. You are prejudging, which is the definition of prejudice, which is something that we've forgotten recently. You're prejudging, and that's inappropriate, and that's unacceptable. So the first thing you do is you call it out. But then the second thing you do, which is the hardest thing, is you invite that person to break bread with you. You invite that person to get coffee with you. Because what you want to do, you're not trying to get that person to agree with every single position you have on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. What you're trying to do is bring back compassion and empathy in the midst of profound disagreement. Because the current framework is saying we don't like compassion and we don't like empathy. So you have to challenge that framework, and in the process, you will transform the conversation you have about Israel.
Thank you, Chloé. I would like to let you continue to speak for another 20 minutes, and I think everybody would very much enjoy listening, and the next logical question should be, is your thesis online, and if not, send it to all the ministries represented at the table. I'm just kidding. I'll leave that further up. We are actually running out of time, unfortunately, although this was a very, very interesting conversation that I conclude with a quote by no more and no less than David Ben-Gurion, who once said that in Israel, in order to be a realist, you have to believe in miracles. Yeah. Well, looking at the know-how, the dedication, and the talent represented in this side on stage, and looking at the friends and supporters Israel has on this part of the hall, I'm not so sure if we really need miracles. Thank you very much.
Noam.